Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you all have been doing good. Today we're talking about the tragic murder of 21-year-old Lauren McCluskey, who was shot and killed outside of her dorm by an ex-boyfriend. This case makes me so mad in so many ways. There were a lot of people involved that could have helped but didn't. I do want to be upfront and tell you that this case revolves heavily around domestic violence and SA. And it's one of those cases that when you hear about it, it will stick with you forever. Lauren was known to be somewhat of an introvert, but according to her family and friends, once you got to know her, she was someone that would never run out of things to talk about. She maintained a high GPA, while at the same time being a star athlete. Lauren was even a Washington State champion in the high jump. And when it came time to attend college, she was recruited to become a member of the women's track and field team at the University of Utah. She was all around a beautiful, intelligent woman who should have had a very long life ahead of her. On September 2nd, 2018, Lauren met a man who was working as a bouncer at a popular bar in downtown Salt Lake City called London Bell. That man is Melvin Sean Rowland, and the two really hit it off. Except Melvin wasn't being completely honest. He had given her a fake name and age, and also didn't disclose something extremely important. Melvin was a convicted sex offender who was out on parole. The two began dating, and it seemed like things were going really great. Melvin hung out with her a lot at a residence hall at the University of Utah, and because of his outgoing personality, he quickly became friends with other students in her building. But by the end of the month, Lauren realized that Melvin wasn't the great guy he portrayed himself to be. She called a couple of her friends upset, stating that Melvin wouldn't let her hang out with anybody. It was at this point that her closest friends realized something wasn't right, and had noticed Lauren's physical appearance start to change. Those two friends actually told some staff members at the University of Utah dorms that they were scared of Melvin and his behavior towards Lauren, even telling them that he often stays the night in her room with her and talks a lot about guns. Here's the first of many things that really anger me about this case. That report by Lauren's friends, made to the staff members at the University of Utah, was not passed to campus police or a campus behavioral team, who could have intervened. Housing officials were aware that multiple people were concerned for Lauren's well-being, but they didn't take action. It wasn't until early October that Lauren discovered Melvin's real identity, and that he was a registered sex offender and was actually 37 years old. She was upset, rightfully so, and briefly went home to Pullman, Washington to try and recover from the shock of the whole situation. On October 9th, she invited Melvin to her dorm room, confronted him about everything, and broke up with him. But because Lauren was a caring person, she allowed him to spend the night at her dorm and even let him borrow her car the next day to run some errands. The next day, Lauren's mom Jill actually called campus dispatch, extremely worried for her daughter's safety, and asked that they escort Lauren to retrieve her car from Melvin. The dispatcher contacted Lauren, and initially she declined assistance, stating that Melvin was just going to drop the vehicle off at her apartment and then leave, which she felt comfortable with. Dispatch told her that they would have security near the building just in case. But at 5 p.m., Lauren called them back, stating that Melvin had dropped her car off at the Rice-Eccles Stadium parking lot and asked for a ride to go and pick it up. This is about a 5-minute drive from her dorm, or about a 40-minute walk. They provided the ride, and she was able to retrieve her vehicle. A few days later, Lauren started receiving obscene text messages, presumably from Melvin's friends, telling her to kill herself. One text message even said that Melvin was dead and that it was her fault. This, of course, was not true, as she had found that Melvin had recently posted on social media and was very much alive. This was the first time that Lauren contacted the university police. She gave them this information and said that she felt that Melvin's friends were trying to lure her out of her dorm. At 9:22 a.m. the very next day, Lauren contacted the university police again and told them that she received even more text messages, this time demanding money in exchange for not posting intimate photos of her and Melvin together online. Lauren sent $1,000 to an account as demanded in hopes to keep those photos private.
Hi, so I'm dealing with a situation where I'm being blackmailed for money.
Over the next few days, Lauren spoke to campus officer Miguel Darris by phone, in person, and by text, providing him the intimate photos in question for the investigation. But it's what Officer Darris did with those photos that makes my blood boil. While Lauren was being stalked and harassed and was relying on Officer Darris for safety, he took those intimate photos of Lauren and showed them to other campus officers not a part of the investigation, which Lauren was not aware of at all. One officer came forward and stated that Officer Darris bragged about getting to look at the photos whenever he wanted. The University of Utah claims that they didn't know about these allegations until a year after the incident. But I'll touch more on this later. On top of speaking with the campus police, Lauren also tried getting help with the Salt Lake City police, but they just referred her back to the campus. It seemed to be this never-ending cycle of not being heard. Chief Dale Brophy stated that the university police did take the report, but they didn't notice that Melvin was on parole, which again, could have potentially saved Lauren. I really want to emphasize this part. The university police did not check to see if Melvin was a registered sex offender or that he was even out on parole. But if they did, they would have realized that Melvin violated his parole terms a couple of times. Melvin's parole terms prohibited him from using any sort of social media, which he ignored and did anyway. Furthermore, a parole agent actually spoke to Melvin on October 16th but wasn't aware of Lauren's allegations because the university police did not communicate them with adult probation and parole. Any involvement in a new crime would have been a violation and would have sent Melvin back to jail. Multiple times, Melvin was caught on security footage at various campus locations looking for Lauren. Lauren ended up sending screenshots to campus police showing Melvin's criminal history and his offender details. Then on October 19th, Lauren calls the Salt Lake City police once again, growing more concerned for her safety. And again, they tell her to call the campus police. Detective Dalif called Lauren back and told her that she would not be back at work to even look at her case until October 23rd. But by then, it was too late. On October 22nd, 2018, at around 3 p.m., Melvin went to the University of Utah and waited for Lauren to return with some of her friends at her dorm for hours. Eventually, at around 8 p.m., Lauren returned and was confronted by Melvin in the parking lot in front of her residence hall. She was returning from a night class and on the phone with her mom when she screamed, quote, "No, no, no," end quote. Melvin grabbed her and she dropped her cell phone and other items on the ground. He then dragged Lauren to a different spot in the parking lot, forced her into the back seat of a car that he had driven to campus, and shot her multiple times. Right after this, Melvin called another woman who he had met on a dating site and asked her to pick him up. While Lauren was dying, they went to dinner at a restaurant and then went back to her apartment where he took a shower. Just 3 minutes after the altercation between Lauren and Melvin, Lauren's father Matt called campus police dispatch and told them what Jill had heard on the phone. He demanded that they respond to the situation. It wasn't until 10 minutes later that campus police went to the parking lot and started the search for Lauren. They found her personal belongings scattered on the ground, and at 9:55 p.m. they found Lauren's body in the back seat of the car. She was pronounced dead at the scene. It wasn't until later that night that the woman who had picked up Melvin realized who he was after she saw news reports about the shooting and recognized photos of Melvin that she called the police. At around 12:45 a.m., the Salt Lake City police located Melvin and followed him on foot to the Trinity Church at 239 East Martin Luther King Boulevard in downtown Salt Lake. Melvin then ran into the church, and as police entered, he fatally shot himself. Initially, it was unclear how Melvin obtained the gun used to kill Lauren and himself. As being a convicted felon, he was not allowed to own a firearm. It wasn't until 22-year-old Nathan Vogel, a co-worker of Melvin's, came forward after seeing news reports about Lauren's murder that he admitted to loaning Melvin the gun. Nathan claims that he had a friend purchase the gun for him as he didn't think he could, due to being generally discharged from the army. At the time he loaned the gun to Melvin, Nathan claims that he didn't know that he was a convicted felon and knew him under a different name. Nathan ended up being charged with unlawfully purchasing a weapon and was sentenced to 3 years of supervised release. More disturbing facts about what could have been done to prevent Lauren's murder has come to light in the years following her death. Starting out with Diamond Security Group, which is the company that hired Melvin as a bouncer for many downtown Salt Lake City restaurants, including London Bell, where he met Lauren. The Utah State Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing issued a cease and desist order against the security company after finding that the company never did a background check on Melvin before hiring him. They also hired him even though he gave them the fake name Sean Fields. If things were done correctly, it's highly unlikely that Melvin would have been working at London Bell, therefore potentially saving Lauren. Adding to the already high amount of unbelievable actions in this case, the University of Utah's president, Ruth Watkins, stated in late 2018 in regards to the university police that, quote, "There is no reason to believe that Lauren's slaying could have been prevented," end quote. However, investigations into this case listed multiple missed opportunities to help Lauren. On what would have been Lauren's 22nd birthday, Ruth announced that the school had made significant changes to ensure student safety, but she also stated that no campus officers would be disciplined in this case. She went on to say, quote, "I do not believe it serves the ultimate mission of improving campus safety to fire anyone who acted in good faith," end quote. But if you remember, this also includes Officer Miguel Darris, who showed multiple officers intimate photos of Lauren and had bragged about getting to look at them whenever he wanted. Even him, President Ruth Watkins, chose not to discipline. Unbelievably, it gets worse because in February of that year, Officer Darris made the exact same mistakes on another woman's case. He responded to a call reporting a domestic violence incident in married housing on campus. Officer Darris went to talk to the woman and provide her with information on how to report an assault when he realized the suspect was there too. He let the man stay as he interviewed the woman. He also didn't check if the man was on parole, even as the man called his parole agent in his presence. Despite the severity of the situation as well as Lauren's, Miguel simply got a warning. It wasn't until months later that Officer Darris resigned from the university's police department. And you did hear me correctly, he wasn't fired, he resigned. He transferred to the Logan Police Department, where he worked until he was eventually fired. But this was only after public outrage for his behavior handling Lauren's case. Furthermore, Detective Dalif, who was assigned to investigate Lauren's concerns, was eventually fired after making the same mistakes on another female student's case. But before she was fired, a 17-year-old girl had reported to Dalif that she was being threatened by a male student at the University of Utah. And instead of investigating the situation and making sure that student was safe, Dalif left work for the weekend without taking any action. But somehow, she now works for the Weber County Sheriff's Office. If matters couldn't get any worse, the University of Utah's police department held an awards ceremony in the summer of 2019 for how they responded to Lauren's concerns before her murder, even though reports showed that several staff members mishandled her case. Lauren's parents publicly said that the awards ceremony seemed really disrespectful, and eventually the university later apologized. Dale Brophy, who was the police chief at the university and who was responsible for not realizing that Melvin was on parole after Lauren reported him to the campus police, retired in October of 2019. He received a severance that included a year of pay at a salary of $151,000 and benefits. The school also threw him a retirement party, which cost $6,000. Am I the only one that's getting worked up? Following this tragedy, more of Melvin's violent past was uncovered. In 2004, Melvin attempted to sexually assault a teen girl. In 2012, he admitted to sexually assaulting that teen girl and 2 other women. And then in 2015, he was suspected but never charged with burglarizing 2 other women he had previously dated. In the parole log for Melvin, it showed that at the time he was being reported by Lauren for harassment and stalking, he had a few violations, which include using a dating app, using social media, testing positive for WEED, and missing a handful of counseling appointments. The reason this went undetected is because the security calls placed by Lauren and her friends and family to the campus security escort department were not entered into the same record management system that campus police used at the time. Following Lauren's murder, this was changed, and now every call is recorded into a single system coordinated with police. Lauren's parents, Matt and Jill, just wanted the university to accept responsibility for their role in Lauren's death. They went on record to say that all they wanted was an apology, but never got one. They asked the school to fire the officers involved, but that didn't happen either. And finally, they tried working with President Ruth Watkins to try and remedy the situation, but she never once responded to their emails. As a last resort, Lauren's parents filed a $56 million lawsuit against the University of Utah, alleging that the campus police could have prevented their daughter's killing and that the school's president was irresponsible for insisting otherwise. The school eventually responded to Matt and Jill's lawsuit, stating that, quote, no matter how heartbreaking, its officers had no obligation to protect Lauren from her attacker, end quote. The school's attorney argued that Melvin wasn't a university employee or student, so the school is not responsible for his actions and had no way to control him. This response set off a wave of unrest within the student body. According to an article by the Salt Lake Tribune, some student leaders at the university accused the school of victim blaming and condemned the administration, criticizing how it handled Lauren's fears, thus creating an atmosphere in which students worry campus police won't protect them. Because of this, one day before the anniversary of Lauren's murder, nearly 100 students, mainly women, walked out of class and staged a protest, standing outside of the school's administration building, carrying signs that said, "Where were you when Lauren needed you?" Despite the public outrage, Jill and Matt unfortunately did not reach a settlement with the University of Utah over their lawsuit. This didn't discourage them though, because a month later they filed a second lawsuit against the university, alleging that the school denied their daughter equal protection under Utah's constitution. And 4 months later, acknowledging for the first time that the on-campus murder of Lauren was preventable. The University of Utah agreed that it could have better protected her and failed, and finally agreed to pay $13.5 million to Lauren's parents. This settlement came on the second anniversary of Lauren's death, and for the first time, President Ruth Watkins said she was sincerely sorry for the loss of Lauren. In January of this year, President Ruth Watkins announced that she will be stepping down from her position at the University of Utah. In an interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, Ruth said that Lauren's case was part of the reason for her departure. In April of this year, former University Police Chief Dale Brophy, who if you remember, retired from the U and received a year's salary and a $6,000 party, filed a lawsuit against the University of Utah claiming he wasn't treated fairly and now wants the school to pay him millions of dollars. Officer Darius, who showed intimate photos of Lauren to other officers, claims he deserves millions too. In the aftermath of Lauren's murder, a Utah lawmaker drafted a bill calling on Utah's public colleges to develop detailed response plans for cases of sexual assault, stalking, and dating and domestic violence. Lauren's father, Matt, testified on behalf of the bill, and it was officially signed into law. The Lauren McCluskey Foundation was created in January of 2019 and is now run by Lauren's parents. The foundation was created to ensure that Lauren's light will always live on. I'll be posting the link to the Lauren McCluskey Foundation in the description below for those that want to check out all of the great work that it's doing and possibly donate if you can. As many ups and downs as this case has, Lauren's tragic death has shed light on the many issues in public colleges and exactly how law enforcement responds to domestic violence cases. The more I researched Lauren's story, the angrier I became. But I chose to talk about this because, one, her story deserves to be heard, and also because I know that it's helped many young women as a result and will continue to do so. I'll also be linking other resources for domestic violence in the description below. I'll see you guys 2 Fridays from now, but until then, stay safe.